the most eagerly awaited of the manifestos was that of the Labour Party, especially given the ambition of their spending plans. I'm going to have a look at the changes that I believe are most relevant, directly or indirectly, to the financial planning process and financial planners. So let's start with personal taxes, and as you'd expect, there's some quite radical changes proposed, impacting, as you would also expect, at the upper end of the earnings or income scale. We'll look at a rate of 45% applying to income above £80,000 and a so-called super rich rate of 50% applying to income above £125,000. We will see dividends taxed as any other income, so there will be no dividend allowance, no £2,000 dividend allowance, just dividends taxed as the same as any other income. We'll also see capital gains tax rates changing markedly because capital gains are going to be broadly taxed at the same rate as income. We'll remove the annual exemption and replace it with a £1,000 de minimis exemption. No mention of rebasing on death or the removal of that, but we'll have to wait and see. So radical changes to CGT, because we look then at rates for many people of 45–50% on capital gains as opposed to the current 10 and 20 and 28% on gains made on property. They've also committed to scrap entrepreneurs relief, to have a look at some kind of relief, but to scrap it. And I should also mention, in relation to capital gains, as a kind of SOP or something to defray a little bit from the harshness of taxing gains as income, is the introduction of a form of indexation relief, but it's not indexation relief. It will be a rate of relief linked to 10-year gilt yields, a kind of real rate of return relief. So some of that is quite like the proposals made in the IPPR, the Institute of Public Policy Research paper, on radical reform to income and capital gains tax, but they don't go quite as far as the IPPR suggested. On inheritance tax, we had the Land for the Many document commissioned by the Labour Party, remember, which suggested a very radical change to inheritance tax, moving to a form of tax that taxed the donee and gave the donee a lifetime cumulative £125,000 allowance, and after that all receipts of gifts will be taxed as income. We're not going to see that. What we've seen instead is a much slimmer proposal. In fact, it's a single proposal by the Labour Party, and that is to remove the residence nil rate ban. But it would still generate, according to their estimate, quite a significant amount of money. So removal of the residence nil rate ban is what we see in relation to inheritance tax. So that's income tax, CGT, national insurance and inheritance tax covered. National insurance, remember, is the freezing of national insurance for any persons earning less than £80,000, so no increases in national insurance is the commitment. So how about businesses? Because a lot of that extra spending money is going to have to be generated from the wealthy, which I've just talked about, and business. So how about business? Corporation tax is where the big changes are, because currently we have a rate of 19%, which was set to drop to 17%, but now isn't. But we have 19%. The Labour Party wish to increase, are going to, if they get into power, to increase that rate to 26% by 2022-23, to reintroduce a small companies rate of 21%, and they're going to move towards that, moving along the scale until we get to 2022-23 to reach that level. So a much increased large companies rate, which would generate an awful lot of revenue of 26%, and a small companies rate of 21%. The definitions haven't yet been set. They've also suggested an excess pay levy, which has been referred to before. It was actually part of the 2017 manifesto. So this is high bonuses, bankers' bonuses so-called in the press. No number was set, but in the 2017 manifesto it was amounts over £300,000, which was seen to be excessive based on that definition at that time. There's to be a new levy on holiday homes, second homes, presumably just in the UK, because it's set at 200% of the council tax level. So that could amount to well over £2,000 per owner of a second home. It seems in the UK, but again, we'll have to see the detail. What else do we have in relation to business taxation? Well, pretty well trailed has been the requirement for large companies to put aside 10% of their shares for employee ownership. And a financial transaction tax, which is set to generate about £8 billion on financial transactions such as corporate bonds, forex spots and interest rate derivatives. And a raft of proposals to freshen up and modernise the taxation and rights of the gig economy and people working within it. State pensions, well, we have the well-publicised proposed WASPI compensation, which is amounting to over £50 billion and more in some estimates. That's compensating women who have been disadvantaged by the movement of the state retirement age, those women born in the 50s, to maintain the triple lock, which seems to be consistent across all three parties, and freezing the state pension at age 66. Radically also, in an attempt to grab the younger voter, is a complete abolition of tuition fees at university, which is quite radical, of course. So that's quite a package, quite a spending target, though, of 80 billion, and we're looking at roughly 23 billion of that target being achieved from the corporate sector and the rest from all of the other changes. So some have thought, should we do something now in fear of these changes? Well, of course, these changes will only be relevant if we have a Labour government or a Labour influenced government, possibly for some of those changes. The key to whether to take action now really does depend on the extent of your fear and your feelings around likelihood of that fear becoming realised. And to look at the cost, don't ever forget the cost of taking early action against an act that may not come to pass. So if it's something that you were going to do anyway, if you're going to pay yourself a dividend anyway, if you're going to realise some investments anyway, then realising them in an environment with the current tax rates against what they may be, and you can look at the polls all you like, but we can say what they may be, then by all means consider that, because the tax rates currently are certainly lower than they would be under Labour, and under a Conservative government they will be pretty much the same. So the key there is, to what extent do you believe that we could have a Labour government? How deep is your fear, effectively? And if the action is relevant and isn't too costly, and you were going to do it anyway, then do it anyway. In relation to reliefs and exemptions and allowances, then the main ones in relation to ISAs, VCTs and EISs. What else do we have? We have inheritance tax and gifting. We have pensions relief. None of those have been referenced in the Labour Party manifesto as being removed, like the ISA exemption, pensions relief, EIS, VCT relief. None of those has been stated as being removed. So fear over those shouldn't be too great. If you feel it's right to take advantage of them, do so, but don't do so if it's not just from a tax fear, because those fears have not been specifically stated in the manifesto. The key thing to all of this is to take advice and to take decisions based on rational thought and projection rather than pure emotion.